Have you ever sat in the stillness of your living room, the clock ticking softly, and wondered, when did the love start to slip away? Not suddenly, not like a door slammed shut, but quietly, like a light dimming, a slow silence where once there were words, a coolness where once there was warmth. You look around and realize you're still giving your time, your care, your thoughtfulness, but somehow it's not returned the way it once was. Maybe it's your spouse. Maybe your adult children. Maybe the person you thought would never drift too far. But now you sit, hands folded, and wonder how you became someone waiting for scraps of attention, waiting for the text that never comes, the invitation that's always next time, the conversation that keeps being delayed. And it hurts because you loved so deeply, because you were there when they needed you, because you poured your whole self into the people you cared for, and now it feels like they don't even notice when you're quiet for days. If you've ever felt this way, please know you are not alone. And more importantly, you are not to blame. Love that fades says more about the other person's limitations than it does about your worth. But here's the hard truth, spoken gently. When love starts to fade, you have a choice. You can chase after it, beg for it, try to make yourself smaller and softer and more agreeable in hopes it will come back. Or you can do something else, something far more powerful. You can turn back toward yourself, not in bitterness, not in anger, but in quiet reclamation, because you were never meant to survive on crumbs. You were never meant to beg for the very thing you so freely gave. Caleb, a retired woodworker in his 70s, shared something tender with me once. After his wife passed, he tried to stay close to his grown children. He invited them over, called often, offered to help, but slowly, they stopped responding. They love me. I know that, he said, but they've got their lives, and I'm no longer in the center of them. At first, he took it personally, wondered what he had done wrong, considered calling again, just to remind them he was still here. But then, he stopped. Not out of defeat, but out of quiet dignity. I realized I was starting to beg. He said, and that's not who I want to be. So he picked up his tools, built a birdhouse, then another, then a bench, then a swing. He started spending his mornings in the workshop, listening to music, sipping his coffee slowly. I stopped waiting for the door to open. He told me, and I started opening my own again. That was Caleb's first step back to his own power. And that's the beginning of your path, too. You don't reclaim your life by demanding love. You reclaim it by returning to the place inside you that never stopped loving. That's where we begin with the decision to stop chasing love that's gone quiet. Helen, 69, was married for over 4 decades. A mother, a wife, a caretaker. She did everything right. She stood by her husband through illness, stress, financial ups and downs. But as the years passed, the affection faded. The conversations grew shorter. The distance grew longer. She tried to reconnect, cooked special meals, suggested walks, bought small gifts. Each time, she was met with polite indifference. She told me, I realized I was trying to prove I was still worthy of love. That realization broke her heart, but also freed her, because love isn't something to be earned, especially not from someone who's grown used to taking you for granted. So Helen did something unexpected. She stopped trying, not out of resentment, but out of respect. For herself, she stopped trying to keep love alive in a space where it had already walked out the door. And then she started painting again, something she hadn't done since her 20s. Each afternoon, she'd sit by the window, let the sun spill across the table, and lose herself in color. She began to smile more, not for him, for herself, and slowly, the ache began to ease. That's the second quiet shift in reclaiming your power, letting go of the need to prove you're worthy of being loved. You already are. Your value isn't up for debate just because someone forgot to cherish it. And here's the third, perhaps the most powerful truth of all. You're allowed to build a beautiful life, even in the absence of the love you hoped would last. Sophie, a widow who had grown distant from her children, told me something I'll never forget. I used to think my life was over when they stopped coming around. I felt like I had failed. But then I asked myself, what if this is just a different kind of beginning? She bought herself a little bicycle At first, she felt silly, but then she started riding it down to the lake. Just her, the wind, and the sound of the world still turning. And one morning, as she sat with her feet in the water, she realized something powerful. "I feel alive," she whispered. "And not because anyone told me I matter, but because I chose to matter to myself." That's it. That's the kind of shift we're talking about when love fades. It's easy to think you've lost everything. But what if beneath that loss, there's something new waiting to rise? Not a replacement, not a distraction, but the pure, steady presence of you finally looking inward and saying, "I'm still here, and I still get to live." There's something most people don't tell you about love when it fades, that the pain doesn't just come from the absence. It comes from the effort you keep pouring in, long after it's gone quiet. You keep showing up, just in case. You keep giving, just to stay close. You keep trying, even when there's nothing left to hold on to but hope. And after a while, it doesn't feel like love anymore. It feels like survival. But here's something I want to offer you, gently and without judgment. Love is not meant to be begged for. And the moment you start pleading silently or out loud, you've already started losing yourself. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. Because when we love deeply, we anchor our identity into the people we've loved. Their attention becomes proof that we matter. Their presence becomes oxygen. So when they pull away, even if they do it quietly, it can feel like you're gasping for air. And that's how overgiving begins. You bake their favorite meal, even though they don't come. You send a text, just checking in. When you are the one waiting for a message, you buy a small gift, hoping it will rekindle some warmth, only to be met with polite thank yous and nothing more. Grace, 72, used to drop everything when her daughter called. She'd babysit, lend money, give advice, anything. "I wanted to stay close," she said. "I thought if I kept giving, she wouldn't forget me." But slowly, she realized something heartbreaking. Her giving had become expected, not cherished, and it left her feeling hollow. She told me, "One night, I looked in the mirror and asked, 'When did I stop taking care of me?'" That's when she made a small but powerful change. She started saying no, not with anger, but with calm. "No, I won't be available this weekend. No, I'm not comfortable with that. No, I need that time for myself." And the sky didn't fall. The relationship didn't collapse, but something inside her began to rise. That's what self-respect sounds like. It's not loud. It doesn't demand, but it's steady. And it saves you. Emily, 6'9", had been in a loveless marriage for years. Not abusive, not volatile, just empty. Her husband rarely spoke, rarely looked up. He didn't hurt her, but he didn't hold her either. Still, she stayed because she believed that loyalty meant staying silent. But loyalty to others should never require disloyalty to yourself. And one day, after years of carrying the weight of their disconnect, Emily asked herself, "What would I do if I stopped waiting for him to change?" She didn't leave. She didn't yell. She didn't start a war. She simply began reclaiming her life inside the life she already had. She took long walks every morning alone. She joined a book club at the library. She stopped waiting to be invited into intimacy and started building intimacy with her own thoughts, her own joy, her own voice. And little by little, she stopped begging for love that wasn't there. Instead, she turned that longing inward. She learned to befriend the ache rather than let it control her. And that, my friend, is a form of power that no one can take from you. You don't need to be someone's emotional doormat to be loved. You don't need to overperform, overgive, or over-explain just to earn a seat at the table. You already deserve kindness. You already deserve consideration. You already deserve love that feels safe and warm and steady. And if you're not receiving that, it's not a sign that you're broken. It's a sign that someone else has forgotten how to love. That doesn't mean you mirror their forgetting. It means you remember for yourself. You remember how to care for your body not because someone will notice, but because it is yours. You remember how to dress in a way that makes you feel beautiful not for compliments, but because you still deserve to feel lovely. You remember how to feed yourself with tenderness, how to speak to yourself gently, how to move through your day with grace even when no one else shows up to applaud it. That is what reclaiming your power looks like. Not a dramatic declaration, not a public performance, but a private promise. I will no longer shrink to fit into someone else's absence. Margaret Webentame had been trying to reconnect with an estranged son for years. Letters, calls, messages passed through other family members, and nothing. She was tired. But more than that, she was starting to lose pieces of herself in the trying. And one day, with a hand on her chest and tears in her eyes, she said softly, "I release you." Not because she didn't love him, but because she was ready to return to loving herself more. And she began writing again. Not to him, but for herself. Poems, short stories, memories that made her feel alive again. And as she wrote, she began to feel whole, not because he came back, but because she did. You don't have to wait for love to return before you start living again. You don't have to wait for closure before you start creating something beautiful with what remains. You are still allowed to rise, even after heartbreak, even after silence, even after years of giving without receiving. Your life is still yours. Your power is not lost. It's just been hidden beneath years of holding on too tightly. And now, your hands can open again. You don't have to beg. You don't have to plead. You only have to remember you are still here. You are still worthy. You are still becoming. When you stop trying to convince someone to see your worth, something incredible begins to happen. At first, it feels like a quiet withdrawal, like walking away from a room where no one was listening. But slowly, it becomes something else, a returning, a rising, a reclaiming of the space you once handed over. There's a shift not outside of you, but within you, and that shift, though small, changes everything. It's not dramatic, it's not loud, but it's powerful. You begin to move differently. You no longer rush to reply to messages that rarely come. You stop making excuses for why you're not invited. You stop pretending that busy is a valid reason for someone to forget your birthday. Instead, you begin to ask a deeper question, not why don't they see me, but why have I abandoned myself waiting to be seen? And that question changes the way you walk through the world. Frank, 76, told me about the moment it all changed for him. After his wife of 50 years passed, his adult children grew distant, not intentionally cruel but distracted. He found himself always reaching out first, always adjusting his needs to fit their timelines, until one Sunday morning, while waiting alone at a diner for a lunch that never happened, he took out a napkin and wrote 6 words that marked the beginning of his healing. "I deserve a life that honors me." He didn't share it with anyone. He didn't turn it into a Facebook post. He just folded it gently and placed it in his wallet. That week, he signed up for a dance class at the senior center. He said, "I stopped chasing their time and started treasuring mine." And the most unexpected thing happened. Weeks later, one of his sons called not out of obligation, but curiosity. "Dad, you sound different." He said, "I feel different," Frank replied. "I'm not waiting anymore." When you stop chasing respect and start embodying it, people notice, not because you force them to, but because your energy changes. You're no longer asking to be loved. You're being loved. You're no longer asking to be seen. You're simply standing, quietly and clearly, in your light. And here's the beauty of that transformation. It doesn't require anyone else to change. You're no longer tied to someone else's behavior for your joy. Your peace no longer hangs in the balance of how often they call or how kindly they speak. Because your joy now comes from how you treat yourself. And others sense it. They might not say it out loud, but they feel it, like the warmth of the sun through a window, like the stillness of a lake that doesn't beg to be admired, it just is. Chloe, a retired teacher and grandmother of 5, told me that when she stopped over-apologizing and explaining every choice she made, her children began to treat her differently. "I used to justify everything," she said. "Why I didn't babysit, why I spent money on myself, why I said no. I was always afraid they'd think I was selfish." But one day, she caught herself mid-explanation and thought, "I'm 68. Who am I still trying to prove myself to? What? She said no to a last-minute favor and didn't give a reason. And something interesting happened. They stopped pushing, not out of resentment, but out of a newfound respect. When I respected my own time, Chloe said, they started respecting it too. That's the quiet truth of reclaiming your life. People may not change because you ask them to, but they do change when your presence shifts, when your energy is no longer desperate, when your voice is no longer seeking approval, when your boundaries are no longer full of guilt. You stop being a mirror for their expectations and become a mirror for your own truth. And in that space, healing happens. Not always reconciliation, not always returned affection, but healing, because for the first time in a long time, you're no longer playing a part. You're simply being yourself fully, freely, unapologetically. There's no need to perform, no need to earn your place. You are your own home now, and that home is steady. That home is kind. That home is yours. Sometimes love circles back. Sometimes when you stop asking for it, it remembers where you are and returns this time not out of obligation, but recognition. But even if it doesn't, you are not empty. Even if the phone stays quiet, you are not alone. Even if the love you once knew never returns, you are not unloved. Because you have learned how to become love for yourself, you smile in the mirror and mean it. You fill your time with things that feed your spirit. You wake up and no longer dread the ache of being forgotten because you are finally remembered by the one who matters most. And that is a quiet revolution. That is grace. That is strength. That is what it means to live not in response to pain, but in alignment with your worth. So take the walk, make the soup, read the novel, paint the sky, laugh at your own jokes, cry when you need to, and know, without needing to be reminded, that you are already enough. You always were. You just forgot for a little while, but not anymore. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you. Truly, I want you to know that I don't take it lightly that you gave your time, your presence, your attention to this conversation, because I know how precious those things are, and I know how often they're given without return. But here, in this space, I hope you felt something return to you, not answers, not fixes, but something softer, something more lasting, a remembering of who you are when you're not reaching for anyone else's approval, a gentle reconnection with the part of you that's always been enough. If love has faded in your life, if it has grown cold, distant, or absent, you are not alone. You're not the only one who's sat in a quiet room, wondering what happened to the warmth you once knew. You're not the only one who's replayed old conversations in your head, trying to find where things went wrong. You're not the only one who's tried, again and again, to be enough for someone who couldn't or wouldn't see you. But you are not broken because they stopped showing up. You are not unworthy because their attention faded. And you are not powerless because love changed its shape. In fact, you have more power than you know, because power doesn't always look like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like grace. It looks like walking away with dignity instead of begging to stay. It looks like choosing solitude over conditional love. It looks like taking care of your health, your peace, your joy without apology. Power, in old age, is not about proving yourself to anyone. It's about remembering that you no longer have to. So if you find yourself in that place where you feel invisible, forgotten, or dismissed, I want to say this directly to you. You are not less valuable because someone stopped choosing you. You are not less lovable because your phone doesn't ring. You are not less real because your love wasn't returned. You are whole. You are sacred. You are still needed. And your story is far from over. Every morning that you wake up is a new chance to choose yourself. Every breath is a quiet invitation back to your own heart. You don't have to live small just because someone else forgot how big your love was. You don't have to stop giving. You just have to start including yourself in the circle of that giving. Start by giving yourself peace. Give yourself permission. Give yourself kindness. Give yourself the freedom to rest, to dream, to say no, to start again, because you deserve it. If you felt something resonate during this video, if a line made you pause, or a moment reminded you of your own story, I would love to hear from you, not just as a viewer, but as a human being who is walking a path that so many others walk, often in silence. Has your relationship with your children, your partner, or your own heart shifted over the years? What have you learned about yourself in that space between loving others and learning to love yourself again? What helped you stand back up after love walked away? Your words, your experience could be the light someone else needs. So if you feel ready, I invite you to share your story in the comments. This space isn't about judgment, it's about reflection. It's about healing and community. And sometimes, seeing our pain mirrored in someone else's words is the first step in feeling less alone. And if you'd like to stay connected, if you'd like more moments like this, where we talk honestly about aging, love, dignity, and strength, I invite you to subscribe, not as a transaction, but as an act of companionship, so we can keep walking together through these tender, powerful chapters of life. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be strong every day, but you do deserve to be seen, to be heard, to be valued, and most of all, to be loved in a way that includes the person staring back at you in the mirror. So take this moment, just for you. Breathe in. Let go of the stories that told you you weren't enough. Breathe out and come back home to yourself. You were never meant to live at the mercy of someone else's affection. You were meant to rise, gently and surely, in the quiet truth of your worth. And you just did. Thank you for being here. Until next time, be kind to yourself. You are still becoming, and you're doing it beautifully.